Buonasera. Hello world. Greetings from Toronto. Greetings from the Global Village for the Monday night webinars. This is the fourth appointment, the fourth episode of the Monday night webinars, making sense of the pandemic world and some kind of chronicles from the Global Village to understand who we are, what matters to us in this very crucial moment for our humanity. And so, thank you. Good evening. It's great to see. I know you're coming. We have a great lineup of speakers and guests as usual. So it's nice that we can spend about a couple of hours together and in the Marshall McLuhan's Facebook group and on YouTube. Thanks to the generosity of Andrew McLuhan, hello Andrew, and the McLuhan Institute. So we are live on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you all for joining us. I see you're coming as usual. I'm going to warm up and do the greetings for a few minutes, and then I will introduce our special guests for tonight. Great. All right, here you see, I wanted to show you this Facebook user. Hi, Paolo, and all speakers. Hi, but we don't know who you are, my dear friend. So, in order to avoid this anonymous kind of comment, please be reminded before leaving a comment to grant StreamYard to the permission for grabbing your name and photo profile, and so we can see who you are. We can see your beautiful face. Just go on streamyard.com/Facebook and then click authorize. So they just grab your name and profile, no other privacy matters, so issues. The idea is that they can, because we are broadcasting, we are streaming on a private Facebook group, you have to authorize StreamYard to grab your face and profile. Okay, so please do it so we can see. Otherwise, we cannot grab your comments. So a little bit of housekeeping before getting started. I wanted to say a few words about our next Monday night webinar. Next Monday night webinar, we have a great lineup of speakers. May the 25th, Terence Bowman, Tom Cooper, Adina Karasik, and Lance Strait. So next Monday night webinar, as usual, Monday night, 8 p.m. Toronto time zone, we will have another lineup of speakers. All right. In the meantime, feel free to say hi on our Facebook or YouTube channel. Say hi. Tell us where are you right now, so you can say hi from Toronto, hi from Brazil, hi from Canada. So we wanted to really welcome you all into this global village. And in fact, here we are. Salvatore Greco, Sal. Hello, Sal. Used to attend the Monday night seminars at the Coach House. Sal, and thank you for joining us, and thank you all. All right. Again, I'll keep the message. Public streaming on the McLuhan Institute. No, this is the message I wanted to remind you. Authorize StreamYard to see your name and profile. So just streamyard.com/Facebook. Great. All right. We have a few celebrations tonight. So before introducing our guests, I wanted to spend a few words. Firstly, today, May 18th, is the ICOM International Museum Day. So we do celebrate arts and culture our heritage in this is very special International Day. And by the way, today's lineup of our speakers and special guests is a kind of a focus on performing arts, how to rethink creativity and imagination, how creativity can help us facing this global crisis. So hopefully my special guests, which are right now in a green room, in a virtual green room, we will address, hopefully, this very important topic, how creativity and arts and the power of imagination, right, can really inspire a sense of new humanity for this global crisis in a to rethink the post-pandemic world. All right. In the meantime, I see my friends here. Alfonso, greetings from Cleveland. Hello, Alfonso. There is another Facebook user. Again, be reminded, go on StreamYard and authorize streamyard.com/Facebook to grab your name and profile. Otherwise, we won't be able to grab your comments. We won't be able to see your comments. It's going to be kind of anonymous one. Okay? So please be reminded to visit streamyard.com/Facebook and just authorize to grab your name and profile. No privacy settings affected, just name and profile, because we are streaming in a private Marshall McLuhan's Facebook group. Okay, great. All right, let me say hi before introducing our special guests to Ellie from Ottawa. Hello. And Steve, hello, Steve. Maybe tonight we will use the little insight you sent me, Steve. Okay, so hopefully, Elaine, one of our special guests in following weeks. So thank you, Elaine from New Jersey. Still, COVID was not considered to be in a way a hotspot. Oh well. No, well, I mean, Bob, hello, Bob, from Forest Hills, New York. Andrew, hello, Andrew. I'll say a few words later tonight on a special anniversary, right? Special sort of celebration. And bonjour, bonne nuit from Montreal, Jean-François Vallet, and again, Alex, the mind behind the McLuhan galaxy. Alex Kuskus, Gutenberg McLuhan galaxy, the most compelling website for everything about Marshall McLuhan. And not only, even more than Marshall McLuhan. And Alex actually is already starting with sharing a quote to inspire a conversation on arts. The artist is always engaged in writing a detailed history of the future because he is the only person aware of the nature of the present. The person of the integral awareness, Marshall McLuhan defined the artist. So tonight we are going to talk about the artist. And hello everyone. Ho ho, Kursk and Mary. Hello everyone. And I need a special music from Elena and Martin from Bologna. And by the way, it's late night in Europe, in Italy. So thank you, Elena, Elena and Martin, for being with us tonight. And there are a few surprises. And by the way, hi from the URL. Hello. That's my special object. And by the way, today we will talk about the objects. So I usually ask my guests and friends to identify a special object, a symbolical prop, a symbolical object to make sense as a companion for this lockdown, this state of isolation. And again, even the Monday night webinars are nothing but an attempt to foster a sense of togetherness, right? We are not alone. We are apart, but not alone. So we wanted to get together and reflect on the making sense of the lockdown age and hopefully the post-pandemic world, how the world will be. And today, again, a special focus on creativity, arts, performing arts. Julia Hildebrand. Hello, Julia. Julia will be with us later tonight, later in the series of Monday night webinars. All right, I think it's time to getting started. Let me just say a few hi to Daniel again, and Mike. Mike Plug will be another special guest in a few weeks. All right. So thank you again, my friends. Thank you, Penny. Thank you. And so, all right, 8 and 10 p.m. So I think it's time to get started. One final reminder to show your name, authorize StreamYard.com/Facebook to grab your name and profile, because we are streaming on a private Facebook group. So you have to authorize StreamYard.com/Facebook. All right. Okay. And Bernadette, hello. Well, so first guest for tonight. So we have 4 special guests. It's a great, really great lineup every week, and I'm impressed by the idea that we are putting together this series of Monday night webinars with friends, colleagues, and champions of Marshall McLuhan's legacy. And the first guest for tonight is a champion of Marshall McLuhan legacy. Is one of the greatest actors, intellectuals, awarded by the Governor General Performing Arts Award in 2015, and he was made a member of the Order of Canada in 2010, and also an honorary doctorate from the Trinity College at the University of Toronto. And among many, thousands of other intellectual and artistic enterprises, in 2018, he performed in The Message, a theater play about Marshall McLuhan, written by Jason Sherman. Well, we met there, actually. So back at the Terragon Theatre in Toronto in 2018. A wonderful play. I have a few pictures I wanted to show you here, and so you can recognize our first special guest for tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are in the Marshall McLuhan Monday night webinar. R.H. Thompson. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Paolo. How are you?
I'm great, and welcome into this Global Village virtual scenario where we are hosting this Monday night webinar. So thank you for coming, for joining us tonight. And so, Robert, how are you? How are you feeling right now, and where are you?
Where am I? I'm in Toronto. I want to say hi to Elena and Martin. We're working peripherally on another project, so it's fantastic that they're here. Hi, how are you in Italy? In Bologna. I hope everyone's well. COVID, wherever we are in the world. I'm in Toronto. Being in the performing arts, being an actor, we're always used to being out of work. We're always used to having precarious employment. So really, the COVID situation, everything is different, but nothing is different. So we're just continuing to live a precarious life until we move on to the next creation that we're working on.
Great. This is absolutely great, and I like to warm up our Monday night webinar tonight. I wanted to remember with you. Actually, we met with Elena. I think it was 2011, so kind of 10 years ago.
Huh?
We met in Bologna. Do you remember? Right? We met in Bologna.
Really?
You were working, right? you were working on this project.
Oh,
The
wow.
world remembers. The
Yeah, yeah.
world remembers. It's a beautiful. It was a beautiful project undertaken by Robert to again as a remembrance for the centennial of the First World War, and again I was inspired by this project. Who actually maybe then you can tell us more about that. But I was inspired by the very title, "The World Remembers," and I think that in 100 years, the world will remember 2020, right? We'll remember, some people say that we are living history, we are making history, we are aware of writing a page of history, right? So it's going to be such a symbolic year for our humanity. So I think the world will remember 2020. So what's your sense of remembering what's going on right now?
If we went forward 1,000 years to 2120, we thought back to 2020, you have to do the comparison to go to 1020 and think how little is left from 1020. I mean, there are the remains of the books and the remains of the buildings, but there's very, very little left from 1020. But there is a massive amount of digital material left from 2020. So the question is, what will be left in 2120? Do you build in stone? Do you build in a Svalbard seed bank? Do you, like the Pharaoh Khufu of Egypt, do you put together tons of rock and build a big pile so people remembered you through a pile of rock? Or do you fill a gazillion little USB sticks with a billion and quadrillion bits of data, and hopefully somebody has the technology to undo the data 1,000 years from now? So when we look at the archaeology, we look at the technology of understanding the stone building or the brick building or the engraving or the hieroglyphic. But 1,000 years from now, yeah, they'll be looking at the stones and we'll be looking at the mess that we've left behind and all the fossils of the sixth great extinction. But will they be looking at the digital remains? And that's my question. In what state will we leave the digital remains? They're not really like stone, which will last for thousands of years. But the little zeros and ones, how do they last? Yep. That's what I want to know.
No, that's very, very impressive. Yeah, the idea that it seems that we are losing something, right? In this huge amount of data we create every day, so, the age of oblivion, right? They say the kind of new so-called dark age, the new digital dark age. We are leaving something behind, right? We are not making sense of this huge amount. It's a kind of losing our cultural memory that makes us really human, right?
Well, if you think back to what we're remembering from 1020 and 20, yes, we look at the buildings, we look at the arches, we look at, oh, there's a stone spear with a metal tip. Oh my gosh, there's the first projectile. But really, the window that opens us into 1020 is the arts, is when we find a poem or a writing or a painting or a vase or a sculpture. It is the art from 1,000 years ago, which seems to carry more information about who they were then than the brick archway or the adobe hut or the whatever. So the question is, for 1,000 years from now, will it be the art that they look at to see, well, who were those people like and what did they do as they were screwing up the world, A, through climate change, and B, through nuclear winter or whatever we want to do with it? Is it through the art that they will see, as we have seen primarily through the art, what the people were like 1,000 years ago? The Chauvet cave paintings in France is art from 34,000 years ago. The bones on the floor of the cave, while they're, cave bear bones, but there's no human bones, but it is the marks that they made on the wall that are so deeply expressive of who they were when the ice was so thick that the ground was so high that they could walk to the British Isles from France because there was no English Channel. It is the art on that wall that leads us into the exploration of who they are.
Right, absolutely great. And I will say the symbolic aspect of our culture, the symbolic nature of what makes us humans, right? So arts is a way to, again, foster that part of human nature. That's great.
We learn the law. We don't learn the laws from ancient Greece. We learn the Iliad. We learn the Odyssey. So, you know, and we made arts into the. Sorry, we'll go on. There you go.
Yeah, no, but again, what our arts, any form of art, is nothing but an attempt for preserving our cultural memory, transmitting stories, the art of storytelling. What this really, again, what matters to us, even when we today we are celebrating the International Museum Day, the day, and so again, celebrating museums are as places where our cultural memory still is still alive, right? And
so the question is, do you include the Marvel comic film series on the superheroes? Do you include that as art and culture? And if you do, what's it saying? And if you look at the economics of it, I mean, if you took the economic pie of the arts in the United States and you looked at what proportion is going into making this superhero, that superhero, with concoctions of artificiality and this kind of cartoon-like dreaming, what are they saying? What's being said at this moment? If some of the great, really interesting films are so marginal on the outside, whereas the center of the arena or the gladiatorial place is full of Marvel comic movies. I mean, if I was a person in 2120 looking back, and I saw one more hulky actor with my chest shaved, a low voice like that, you're doing incredible things with, biceps that could only go through CGI, then I thought, what are those people doing?
Yeah, and in this regard, we have a comment from our audience, Bernadette. Well, then people in 2120 are going to see lots of memes, actually, right? And many
if they're in stone or paper, but if they're in zeros and ones, how are the zeros and ones kept for another 1,000 years?
Will be preserved. Yeah, it's in fact it falls under the idea of a digital heritage. So conceiving heritage as a tangible material form of our culture. So the digital heritage, something that must be preserved, must be curated in order to again transmit it to the future. And talking about the future, Robert, I wanted to make with you an important homage. So this is a McLuhan Monday night webinar. I wanted to make a special homage tonight to our our Eric McLuhan. Eric McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan's son, passed away exactly 2 years ago. So today is the second anniversary of Eric McLuhan's death. And again, so I wanted to remember with you the great legacy and the great spirit of Eric McLuhan. I'm going to show you, and you all folks at home, I like to get your comments from Facebook and YouTube, so to celebrate the great legacy of Eric McLuhan. I'm going to show you a very short clip, just 1 minute, and then I'd like to get your comment about that comment, that Eric McLuhan's insight. Just 1 minute. Enjoy.
Okay. Well, I used to hear all the time, Marshall McLuhan was ahead of his time. He could see the future. He was ahead of his time. He wasn't. He was ahead of the people around him. So he wasn't ahead of his time, he was ahead of his contemporaries. As to the future, well, he said the future is already here. And if you look around, you'll see it in embryo, but you will see it. So he had developed a set of tools that enabled him to look around and see what other people couldn't see because they weren't thinking or using the right approach.
And so the future is already here. What kind of future we are expecting? What kind of future we are building in this current scenario? What kind of what lessons we are learning in this
The
moment?
same question was asked of Margaret Atwood with The Handmaid's Tale, saying, how could you project into the future with everything you wrote very disturbingly in The Handmaid's Tale? And she said, well, everything in the book has actually already happened. I didn't include anything in The Handmaid's Tale that hasn't already happened. And so that is what Mr. Turner did when he was painting those landscapes and the skies, at the end of his career. And that was, it seems, what McLuhan is doing. They're just looking at the signs around them of where we're actually going. They're not looking into the future. I think totally agree with Eric. So that's the point. I mean, if you're an artist, you look. It is the quality of the vision which defines the artist. It's not the fashionability, it's not the subject, but it's the quality with which you see. And you can't buy that, you can't make that. Marvel Comics can't pull that one out of $1 billion budget. So that's why the artists that's why the artists don't usually work in 72-story buildings and have very large 6-figure salaries.
Right. And so, by the way, Mike is asking, where is that clip from, Paolo? It's from me, actually. I've been the pleasure of making a few interviews at the McLuhan Center back in 2015. And so it's a short clip with Eric. And so, again, it's a way to remember Eric, his great legacy, his spirit, his brave and relevant legacy for the McLuhan Scholarship, for the media ecology community. So he left a great heritage, a great intellectual heritage. We still have to make sense of it. So again, remembering Eric McLuhan, and a big hug to Andrew McLuhan, Eric's son, for putting together the McLuhan Institute, actually, to really foster the legacy of Marshall and Eric McLuhan, their books, their works. So we support you, Andrew, right, in holding the torch for the future of the McLuhan's scholarship. So thank you again, Andrew, for supporting this remembering of Eric McLuhan. And again, my friends at home, so we need to really, really be grateful, I think, to Eric for his great legacy. Okay, so Robert, I like to bring our guests, which are waiting on the green room. So I will be back to you later, then in a more engaging way, even with our people and folks in the Facebook and YouTube channel. And by the way, so folks at home, feel free to comment, to share your thoughts. Please be brief, so be short, otherwise there is no space for putting the comment on the screen. But again, so if you are keen to share your thoughts, this is a community. We want to foster the sense of togetherness as a community of friends and colleagues in the McLuhan's Media Ecology Scholarship. So feel free to step in, okay? Feel free to really share your comments. We really matter, okay? And so, thank you, Robert. I'll be back to you in a little while for keep discussing, okay? Thank you. And so our next speaker, our next guest speakers is we get into the real sense of artistic interpretation of reality. She's a great pianist and composer, well known for her powerful performances and innovative concert programs with a diverse and a variety of compositions and works. She is also an active member in the media ecology community. She's a scholar, not only a pianist, a scholar in the field of in the relationship between technology and music and media to some extent. So I like to welcome with a round of applause here at the Monday night webinar, Rhea Beaumont. Hello,
Hello.
Rhea. Hello, Rhea.
Hello. Nice to see you.
How are you? How are you? Where are you, by the way? Where are you right
I'm in
now?
Toronto. I'm a little north of the downtown, so it's a little more green space in North York. So there's some little trails you can walk through, and maybe the weather eventually will get warm enough to have more than a brisk walk. I'm a bit of an indoor cat being a pianist. I like to stay inside as it is. So that's one thing that I am used to doing. Yeah, that part I can handle okay.
Yeah, and I think for an artist, let's say that the lockdown mindset for an artist, it's a quite of common attitude, right? So let's say generally speaking, the artist needs to stay sometimes at home and practicing and creating, composing. So what's your sense of are there some benefits from the lockdown for a pianist like you, or what's your sense of this?
Well, it's actually very there's a duality there. We go from being in the practice room on our own, learning our craft, honing it to be performance ready, and then being in public and on the stage and having the feedback from the audience. So while one half is still there, I could still work at home if my piano was in better tune. It would be a little nicer, but the entire presentation of the work has just vanished. So I think I'm navigating the situation because it's not the same world, especially performers. Myself, I do a lot of live performance, and there are some people who are streaming. I'm not yet set up for streaming. I suppose I'm going to have to be, but I'm just wondering what the impact is going to be, and how I'm wrapping my mind around it is, what's it going to be like without that immediate audience feedback? Because I love doing virtuoso music. I like being on the edge, some of my programs are called, and without that, I don't know. I'll have to see how it goes.
Sure. I've seen a lot of artists performing online, of course, over the past few weeks. Zoom concerts, digital theater plays. So the idea of digital performing is something that we should take into account, probably even as to rethink the way artists perform and so on. Have you been performing or looking at this phenomenon over the past few weeks? Digital concerts?
Yeah, I have been grappling with this, figuring out what's the best way to record the piano, because it's such a of all the instruments, it has the widest range. It has the overtones, so you have to set up microphones in a really great way. So I've already been in contact with a recording engineer and suggest how to do it. As I said, the one thing I wish I learned is how to tune my piano. So my middle register is a little down, so my octave is just slightly off in parts, and that's funny because I should have had it tuned before this happened, but who knew? So it's going to be interesting to see when you perform, but you're performing and there's no feedback. There are people out there, but normally when you're streaming, you don't have all of the people, like the people who are here tonight. I can see you, I can see the guests, but I can't see everyone else watching. And for me, that's the part that I'm going to really have to adapt to. and to try to find, as I navigate a new way of being true to the music and really helping the audience grasp what I do, because a lot of it is contemporary, and it needs to have a fairly good sound system and a good piano.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, unless you use a digital piano, of course, it changes everything. So we will talk more about tonight, more about how this new scenario is affecting and changing the way artists perform. We can even use the very famous catchphrase: "The medium is the message." We have a new medium. We have a new call it Zoom or whatever online, and how that medium is impacting the actual message of performing arts. So we'll be talking more about this, and also with the actual next speaker. So thank you, Rhea, for warming up now. I'll be back to you in a little while, and now I'm going to present our next speaker, which is again in the field of creativity, in the field of innovation in creativity. She is not only a journalist, a professor, but also a creator, an educator, a researcher, of course. I think working in the intersections between arts and technology. I do remember a few years ago a few projects on how exploring the artistic qualities of our digital media. So our next guest and speaker, she's the director of the Creative Innovation Studio at Ryerson University, and among many other things, she just launched, I wanted to show you, she just launched in response actually to the COVID-19 emergency, state of emergency. She launched this initiative, which is called Creative Communities Create Initiative, presented by the Creative Innovation Studio at FCAT. So the mind behind this beautiful initiative is Ramona Pringle. Hello, Ramona. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So
How
nice
are
to
you?
see you. I'm all right. You know, I think this many weeks into it with a toddler at home, and we went in and did the pandemic puppy, and so it's exhausting working full time.
What's his
but
name? His or her name?
It's her. This is Luna.
Luna.
She knows. It's like everyone in the house, whether it's a puppy or a toddler, knows when it's an important conversation and wants to be part of it. Also, I'm sure you've
We will
experienced
spend
that.
some time. Why not? Why not? Hey, Ramona. Well, I think a person like you at home can spark a lot of ideas, can generate a lot of ideas, right? So I think that kind of creative people can make sense even in this state of isolation, to do something, to create something, to take advantage, probably even. I know, probably like me, we run a lot left and right. We rush every day. We used to rush a lot. Now at home, we have probably even more time to get concentrated or to make sense of what's going on. So I think that's why I was curious to know more about your initiative. And also, well, the core question is the lessons we are learning from the current scenario. So what did you learn right now?
Well, it's so fascinating. You know, I've spent so much time watching and chronicling and researching the way we engage online and communities, and how we form profound experiences where it's not just passive interactions, but really meaningful relationships and meaningful experiences. And I think so much of it has to do with a shared creative experience. So with the Communities Create initiative that you mentioned, you know, I was on sabbatical, which in some ways is like being in quarantine, in that, you know, I was already living in sweatpants and rarely going out, and very much in a very focused mode. But what happened about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago now, is I started getting contacted by all sorts of creatives and also people outside of the creative industries who wanted to tap the potential of creatives, asking what can we do. And of course, at that point, very much the focus was around getting good scientific information out to the public. And yes, we all get those government alerts, but we also know what gains traction on YouTube and Instagram is different. It's emotional and it's evocative and it's got those sort of viral, everyone's been talking about memes, it's got a different tone. And so thinking through what we could do, as I was looking, a month down the road, what was going to be important to Canadians at that point, very much wanting to support the creative industries. And so what I couldn't shake was the idea that the mental health collateral of all of this was going to be huge, no matter who you are, no matter what your age. Whether it's loneliness if you're single and living alone, whether it's grief for a world that we may never return to, or fear that maybe we will return to parts of it that we wish we would leave behind, that we might, want to fix through the ability to step away from things and maybe reflect a little bit. Certainly, I think fear and anxiety about the economy, about the food chain, there's so much that's going on. And so the idea was to create a creative response that through creative output, we could share that, answer that question, how are you feeling right now? And it's really been incredible to see. We've got all these organizations that have come on board, from the National Film Board to TIFF to the Second City, all holding these workshops that are free and online and open to everybody around that question, how are you feeling right now? And I say all this and I'm so excited by it. And it's really been, wonderful to see the generosity. It's a gift, it's free, of, artists and the creative community. And so that's part of it. And it feels so good that it's happening and that people are responding to it, that, I could talk forever about it. But in parallel, you asked me what I've seen. And I think there's something really fascinating when people make something together in terms of the shared space that gets created online. We're very used to now spending our days in front of screens. You keep talking about Zoom calls, but when we're on a Zoom call, I see a flat screen in front of me and I see you in your room. And as much as it's wonderful that we're connected in this moment through conversation, we're very aware of the fact that we're in different space. Now, if you look at something like Animal Crossing, which has become a huge phenomenon in the last 6 weeks, the video game, part of the appeal is that it gives people that sense of presence, that instead of there being this flat screen between them, they're there together. And yes, there are these silly little animals, and yes, it all looks cute and cartoony, but they're there together. And they're doing things together. Well, the fascinating thing that I've seen about creativity, and whether it's people baking together in real time, or as we've been seeing in these workshops, trying out photography.
I know your baking creations. I saw some beautiful, I don't know if they are delicious, I guess so, but I saw they are beautifully designed baking
and part
creations.
of what I've been doing with baking, the first thing that I just thought I would do when we were in quarantine mode was something called make-alongs, where I thought I'm just going to give my friends all the ingredients that they need, and we're going to make the same thing at the same time. And that's where I started realizing this idea of presence, where even if it is a Zoom call, the second we are all creating something together, you're not reliant on constant conversation. There can be silence. We can just be together. And I think that's one of the fascinating things that creativity allows, is that sense of shared space. So all of a sudden, we are in this virtual space. We're in this virtual world, even though it's not computer generated. It's not The Sims. It's not Second Life. It's not Animal Crossing. But because we're making something, it extends that space. And I think it's, you start noticing, this is something that I'm thinking about a lot right now, because we are trying to think through, what is school going to look like? What are conferences going to look like? All of these communal shared spaces. Well, the thing that Zoom misses is not just about the lesson. It's not just about the keynote lecture. How do we recreate passing someone in the hall? How do we recreate looking over at someone's computer screen and saying, wow, that's really cool. Did you make that? That's beautiful. Those human moments is what we need to be building. And that's, I think, where we're starting to see, and I think it's especially when it is creative output, we're starting to see the different ways that we can play around with space. It's that whole idea, if you go back to kind of early web days of skeuomorphism, where we wanted calendars to look like our calendars, and the recycling bin and our files had to look like pieces of paper. And we're sort of there now, where we're trying to think through what the digital duplication of our real world experiences is going to be. And we're kind of just mapping it one-to-one, as opposed to thinking through, like, what are the objectives of this? What's the output that we want from this? And that's one of the things that I've seen, whether it's through Communities Create, whether it's through the make-alongs that they do where everyone's just baking, is when you are making in real time, it does create this shared sense of space. And so I think it's an indication, or it's sort of like a little suggestion that there's ways of building virtual communal space that we maybe haven't started designing yet.
No, no, I completely agree. And from our audience, Daniel has remembered the idea of Harry Jenkins' convergence culture. So probably the lockdown gave us an opportunity to really put our hands on practically on this idea of convergence culture, to become a part of, become producers, become prosumers, right? So the idea that we consume, but also we can produce culture and creativity as a strategic factor to really foster there's a sense of belonging, the sense of togetherness. I call it the digital closeness. So the idea that we can use digital technologies to be closer each other, to support each other, to face inequalities, digital inequalities, and so on. And not by chance, arts and culture. I was impressed by a lot of museums, archives opening up their contents, their websites, and providing a lot of content, right? A lot of content to really help people making sense of this state of isolation. So it's nice to see that, well, there are some benefits we can take from this scenario. Of course, probably on the other side, we need to face the issues. Of course, we can even talk about that. However, so thank you, Ramona, for bringing all those insights into the discussion. I see a few comments already from the audience. Sal, great idea, Ramona. It's okay. By the way, please be shorter, okay, in your comments, friends and folks. So otherwise, it's a kind of keep it short if you can. And the meal together, experiencing this virtual meal. Alex, Commodore 64, my first computer toy, there it was, still have it. And by the way, there is a return of the Commodore 64 nowadays in a kind of remembrance of that technology. So, all right, Ramona, I'm going to introduce the next speaker. So I'll be back to you in a little while. And I want to know more about both the sides of this cultural creative wave generated by the pandemic, and so how we can make sense of this. So I'll be back to you in a little while, and thank you again. And in the meantime, it's time to introduce our fourth speaker for tonight, and then we are going to also open up to comments and questions from you folks. So final and fourth speaker for tonight. I lost my notes here. Where are you, Barry? Where are you? Here we are. All right. Sorry. Barry Vacker, he is a professor, associate professor at Klein College of Communication at Temple University, media theorist, but also an artist, a mixed artist whose work span the intersection of art, film, media, science fiction, dystopic visions of the future, technology, philosophy. He edited a beautiful collection on Black Mirror and critical media theory back in 2018, and another collection which is called The Media Environments, and many other works and books to explore how artistic expressions can help us understand the media environment. Particularly recently, our next guest published this piece, Dreaming Hot and Cool, which is, of course, a reference to Marshall McLuhan, Dreaming Hot and Cool in the Time of Corona. And so we want to learn more about what is hot and what is cool in this pandemic or post-pandemic world. So join me, welcome Barry Vacker. Hello, Barry. How are you? Hold on. There is, as usual, technology helps a lot, but sometimes there are some issues. No, we can't hear you, Barry. I think we tested, but it's not working anymore. So, okay, I see you're. Okay, you have to unmute yourself. You muted. I see your mic is muted. Okay. All right, great. Welcome. You know, we need to face with technological unexpected consequences.
Yes.
All right, we made it. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and first of all, where are you actually? Where are you?
I'm in downtown Philadelphia right now, and right in the heart of Philadelphia, and in my loft studio. And so there's some artwork behind me there, or artworks in progress. And so yeah, just sort of riding out the corona here in Philadelphia.
Well, so what's going on with the hot and cool corona? what's the sense of this kind of provocation?
Well, it is a provocation. It's a probe kind of concept in a way, and that is the essay that I published there has a lot of rapid fire text and things like that, and it's in the it got curated into the poetry section inside Medium, which I have a whole series of essays in there. Anyway, but the hot and cool that I'm using in that essay and the rapid fire text actually it goes back to an essay that Julia Hildebrand and I wrote a couple years ago called Hot and Cool in the Media Scene. And last year it won the Culkin Award at the MEA conference, and we had an art exhibit and everything. And so the hot and cool that we have is a bit different than the McLuhan formulation. We've taken the ideas and kind of pushed them further into the 20th century. And for me, the genesis for the idea was the first time one of my phones got really hot in my hand. And, you know, the little thing is spinning and you realize it's really hot and something is locked up. And that it was almost like a light bulb went on, because a couple minutes earlier, I was looking at some Hubble deep field images, and I was just sort of chilling out. And the genesis was that. And so for hot media, we're talking about all the utmost proximity that's provided by all the media technologies in the global village. And so we have just this flood of images and information and energy coming in. So your phone gets hot in your hand, your laptop heats on your desk. We have high temperatures, we're taking people's temperatures to get in buildings. We have a hot planet where you have higher tempers in social media. So there's, I think, pretty much most of what's happening with our discussion of the corona and all our political and social issues are happening in hot media conditions, which are reactive, not reflective. They're looking for instant feedback, emotive reactions, and a lot of different things that aren't necessarily the long-term, more reflective kind of thinking that you would get with cool media, which looks away. And so we have a sort of a different way of thinking. Hot media are really focused on humans. In fact, if we reformulate this not as social media, but as ego media, exo media, or technologies that look away, space telescopes, just look out into the chill of the universe. And things are moving away. And so there's utmost proximity, then there's great distances. And I think there's sort of an existential stance that our social media provide. And that is that and this is borrowing from McLuhan, that we're the vanishing point. And all the information is coming in and it's heating up those conditions, whether it's global warming, climate disruption, or hot tempers online, yeah. Flame wars, hot takes, all of that, I think, are the conditions that we're in. And so in that essay that you posted, and again, thank you for doing that, I sort of have an 8-minute riff on that. And there's a lot of rapid fire text for the hot media and different things happening. So I think we're sort of trapped in these hot media conditions as we battle this hot virus.
Yeah, in fact, no, thank you for pointing this out. And in fact, the McLuhan's quote you wanted to bring with you in the discussion is images are project at you. You are the screen.
That's
the
right.
images wrap around you. You are the vanishing point. So do you think this is relevant for today's state of connectedness?
Yeah, I think it's when McLuhan was talking about the electronic screen of television reversing the vanishing point, and he was explaining that in great detail in the book Through the Vanishing Point, Art and Poetry in Space. And so I think he's way onto something. He's totally spot on, but it's even more extreme now, because I think that what happens here, each phone is a gigantic vanishing point that it just brings it all right to you. So each person is carrying their vanishing point with them in their pocket, in their hand. And so while we have this sort of global connectivity, the Western representation of the vanishing point being out there, and I talk about that a little bit in the essay, the Western representation out there, it's all in here. And I think in a way, this is sort of a platform vanishing point in which reality comes to you. And in effect, it centers you in the universe. It's sort of like an old geocentric model, but it's an egocentric universe. It's all coming to you. So it's no surprise that we get an explosion of narcissism, echo chambers, a lot of tribalism, because I think when conditions are hot and things are coming at you, you're naturally maybe looking for a little security. Tribal behavior kicks in, that instinct. And so you find groups to identify with and things like that. So I would say that, there's a lot of beauty and power in this. So I'm not making fun of the phone or not saying it's not a beautiful device, but it does have these conditions it generates. And I think the existential stance of the iPhone or the smartphone is I am the center of everything. And I think that's the existential stance. And we can't really understand the full effects of these technologies until we acknowledge that that's the starting point, is I'm positioned at the center of everything.
And well, to some extent it is, particularly in this moment. So I see you are using your cell phone probably as your companion object for tonight's webinar.
No,
you have another. Okay. Hold on. Wait a minute, because my friends. Okay, so thank you for again. So presenting the hot and cool idea, Barry. So I'm going to bring all my guests in here. All right, let me put. Back this image. So I'm going to I was curious because I asked my guests and friends and colleagues to identify, to bring an object for tonight's webinar. So a companion, a symbolical object, a spatial probe and property to make sense of what's going on. A symbolical interpretation. An object can really inspire a sense of reflections for today's situation. So we're going to have a short, brief merry-go-round. Okay, I think because Barry is on top, Barry is gonna start. Then Rhea, Robert, and Ramona. So you can, in just a minute, in a couple of minutes, explain what is your object and why you wanted to bring this object as your companion tonight. So Barry first.
Okay, so can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I've got something in my hand right now. You can't see it yet, but about 47,000 years ago, this was very, very hot. In fact, it was too hot to handle. And now it sits on my desk, and when everybody sees it, they go, wow, that's so cool. So at one time it was very hot, and that is a lava rock. It's a chunk, and it's about 10 pounds. And I found it on some land that I owned in far west Texas. And there's a lot of lava and different kinds of things like that in very far west Texas. And so every time I walk on my land and I'm walking around, I'm crunching through the lava and the dirt, and there's creosote and cactus and yucca and giant ant beds and everything. It sort of brings me back to the sort of condition that we're in, and that we have this ancient planet that we're living on, and right underneath the surface, it's very, very hot, at least most underneath the surface, and the farther you go. So I think we're living on sort of a warm, if not hot, planet. And it just reminds me that it's a very old planet, and I'm a new creature on it, and I'm very fortunate to be here and to know that, yeah, I'm made of stardust, and our solar system is billions of years old, and this is just one small reminder of that.
Great, that's great. Thank you. This is absolutely great. And now, Rhea.
Okay. I have my teacup. It has my infusion for my green or often chamomile tea and my lid. And this is very symbolic for me because it's my stay-at-home mug, and it also it obsolesces my travel mug. So I won't be needing my travel mug, even though it does have my lovely raven, which is symbolic from the arts and inspiration with it. But this mug goes with me when I travel. And so this other one reminds me, though, also, instead of a coffee break where I want to maybe get more energy, this is my tea break where I want to really come down. But the ritual component is still the same, where you're taking a time out and a break. It's just you have to get used to. This is the only break. This can go away for a little while. So this reminded me of the acceleration of the media and everything. Well, we're learning to decelerate, and I think that's what we're finding kind of uncomfortable.
Great. I like the idea that this is a sort of we are living a permanent coffee break, right? Permanent tea break, an ongoing tea break or coffee break situation. So thank you. And now, Robert, your turn. What's your object?
My object is that. Subtle, eh? It's from a play. It's a play between a figure like Conrad Black, a media baron of a very political persuasion, and a left-wing journalist. And this is what the character who played Conrad Black played. So it's about power. And when we're in the arts, in whatever era that we're in, we are always having to dance with power. And the question, so the power, though they who hold the power change, whether I'm the painter in the Chauvet cave, whether I'm the pharaoh Khufu at the pyramids, or whether I'm painting a Madonna and Child, or whether I'm writing a play or doing a Marvel comic, or whether I'm in Barry's Vanishing Horizon, which is that foam. The question that the artist must always ask, and not necessarily be political, but must be aware of, what is the power equation here? And the foam that Barry holds up and says that's the vanishing point, which he's totally and wonderfully identified, is a very, very powerful point. Whose power? For what end? How are they influencing what goes through that vanishing point? And how do we, the artists, either dance with that, resist that, speak about that? Because to be blind or to be non-cognizant of the power dynamic that determines whether I paint the cave or make the pyramid or make the Madonna and Child or make the Mayan monument or the Easter Island statues or whatever, means you have taped over one eye. And what the artist does is they keep both eyes open all the time. And that's what makes us uncomfortable. So mine's about power. And this is the expression of it. My hat is bigger than your hat, which means I'm more powerful.
This is awesome. And well, thank you for reminding
Paolo,
how important it is.
Paolo, can I add one phrase there? I grew up in Texas, and they have a phrase down there: "All hat, no cattle."
That's good.
I'm writing that down. That's a good one. All hat, no cattle.
Yeah, I agree. Great. So let's continue the merry-go-round. Next in line, Ramona. Ramona, here you are. What's your object?
Well, since you requested it, I knew you wanted something baked, something homemade. So this is what we happen to have made today. This is a
awesome
3-dimensional trying to get it lit so you can see it all right. A 3-dimensional custom cookie robot. Which, something,
Cool.
I didn't plan it, but I think it maybe couldn't have come out better. You can see that it's, maybe you can't, but it was definitely collaborative. Definitely speaks to this moment of sort of sanity or salvation through making and through hands-on and creating something from scratch. There was no template. I think speaks to the shared experience of creation together that I was talking about. And also in some way, I think in this moment, we've been gardening and growing vegetables and baking. And I think that there is sort of a comfort in knowing that we can do things with our own hands. And so, I don't know, is it ironic that it's a little robot in the most analog form it could possibly be in? Obviously not functional, but, came from something on Pinterest, but for this moment, maybe kind of perfect.
No, I like it. I like it very much. I think it's perfect for expressing the idea that cooking is a way to foster creativity. I do, even my wife, we always do cook with our kids, so it's a great way to engage them and acculturate and the pleasure, the joy of making stuff, right? So I think a lot of people rediscovered how important it is cooking and baking and creating and cooking at home during this moment of isolation. So thank you, Ramona, for
you're welcome. I think
bringing
there's
this.
something fascinating also in terms of there's something cyclical right now in that people are sharing what they're making, they're posting what they're making, they're looking for inspiration, they're learning to do things online. I mean, there's something fascinating when you think about how much you can learn right now on the internet and how many tutorials and classes, and whether you want to fix your plumbing or whether you want to do woodworking or whether you want to learn how to make a robot out of cookies or sourdough starter, all of these things can be learned, and it's incredible. And yet, there's something so satisfying about moving away from the screen, and it's this dance back and forth where there's the requirement that you tune out, log out for a little while, but then there's the sharing, and it is this sort of cycle that goes on and on. I think it's fascinating in some ways, probably a better relationship than we often have with digital screens, because there are those ebbs and flows.
Yeah. And by the way, I got the idea. You can pass your robot to Rhea for her coffee break. So it's going to be symbolic.
Start with the head.
And again, last 2 weeks ago, we had Howard Rheingold, right, the great media scholar who argued the idea of virtual communities and smart mobs, right? So this kind of sharing stuff, sharing ideas, tutorials, and so on, it's a kind of a smart mob, right? So we are sharing not just to please our ego, maybe also, but also to really share and let other people do and learn and create together. So I think there is something smart in this sharing stuff during the pandemic, right? Okay, my friends. And now, talking about smart mobs, smart folks, it's 9:08. I want to engage our Facebook and YouTube friends in the Marshall McLuhan's Facebook group and in the McLuhan Institute YouTube channel. I want to engage all our friends at home with a special experiment. Every weekend I'll try to experiment a new format, new ideas. So I wanted to, first of all, yes, screen this. Be reminded, if you want to get your comment on the screen, just authorize streamyard.com/Facebook to use your name and profile. So because we are streaming on a private Facebook group, technically you have to authorize no privacy issues at this moment, just grabbing your name and profile to be shown on the screen. Okay, so if you want to comment. And so, dear folks, it's now time to engage all of you and we are going to do a special experiment. Each of our guests were asked to identify a Marshall McLuhan quote as a relevant quote, relevant for this current scenario, relevant for inspiring thoughts in this moment. So I will start with Robert. Let me set this way. All right, Robert, ready? So let's pick your quote. And folks at home, feel free briefly to comment, to share your reactions, to share your probes, your puns, your creative inventions. You can remake and reformulate the same McLuhan's quote. So, folks at home, feel free to play with the quote that Robert wanted to bring up into this tonight. And this is the probe chosen by Robert. In this electronic age, we see ourselves being translated more and more into the form of information, moving toward the technological extension of consciousness. Wow. Robert, what's going on?
I didn't write it.
What's your and by the way, so let me show again that beautiful pictures of the place. So let's pretend that you are back into your character there, right? Let's pretend for a minute so you are back into the Marshall McLuhan's professorial dress and so on. What's your sense for this quote, this extension of consciousness?
Well, like the hub in the middle of a wheel, the spoke of that idea can go in almost any direction. Whether you want to talk about power, whether you want to talk about blood, whether you want to talk about the blood sport, whether you want to talk about a culture of zeros and ones. But in the end, life is a blood sport. You die. And in the age of COVID, sometimes the deaths aren't so well. You are born, and you are born to anguish or pain or joy. And there's always blood. In the 0 and 1 world, in the technological world, that blood is absent. The blood has been drained from us, as it were. Nothing wrong with that, because it's a very, very powerful medium. As Barry's talking about, it's that place. And the camera, when we were putting lenses in front of copper plates or lenses in front of plates with, silver iodide on it that took a couple of minutes, and when we put lenses in front of celluloid, and then we got lenses in front of a digital storage device. And at that point, things sped up incredibly. And they moved, and we've always been fascinated by this ultimate speed called light. We don't know why it has a sort of set speed that doesn't go beyond. It's one of the, like gravity, like light, like space. These are all huge mysteries to us. But once we got into putting cameras to memory cards and zeros and ones, things not only became more utterly convenient, could be connected in so many ways through Zoom and all the rest of it, but some other power entered the equation. And that power is what we have not yet fathomed. As soon as you make a space, in this case, it's a technological space, first we think, oh, the internet is invented, it's be very democratic, everyone around the world can speak, we don't have intermediaries, we don't have large corporations, we don't have recording companies, everybody can go on and talk. And that is a flourish of a democratic creative idea that's intoxicating. But literally, it's only been up 10 to 20 years when the forces who want the reverse come flooding into it. And so where we stand as artists, we must be cognizant of this happening. When we go online and we do a Zoom play or this play or that play, or I've got 400,000 followers, or my series plays in 162 countries, that's all very well and good. And that's the candy and the cake that they give you. Oh, your series is in 160 countries. Well, whoopee. It's the story being told through zeros and ones. And how does that affect the life on your end of the screen and my end of the screen? Because both of us will bleed, both of us will cry, and both of us will have children or die. That is the transition that we're not talking about. And those who want power are in there. We've seen that with security. We've seen that with privacy. We were given a rude wake-up call when people like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden said, you have to understand what's happening in these zeros and ones world. You have to understand, it's not just a benevolent, oh, I can visit my friends on the web. It's an accumulation of technological information that is the most repressive potential ever made. So when you create in the world of zeros and ones, you must hear those chords that are around you. And if you don't, you've taped your eyes open. And I'm not for that.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And I was looking at some comments from the audience. Daniel just commented, media is an extension of humans. Humans are extensions of nature. Nature is an extension of consciousness. We are uncovering the technological extension of consciousness. And well, again, thank you, Daniel, for sharing. I was curious, have you been performing on over the past few weeks online, on Zoom or any other platform? If yes, if do, what's your sense of relationship to the audience through the digital stage?
Well, the digital platforms are the paint box that's been given to the performers and given to the artists. You know, the Holy Roman Empire gave everybody a paint box, and the paint box said, paint Madonna and Child. So they did that for 300 years. Right. So we've been robbed of our kind of, in real-time spaces. So we've been given the digital zeros and ones paint boxes. So you'd be a fool not to use it because it's a very powerful medium. But those of us who work in the theater, which is a blood sport, but then also do television and film, which is a zeros and ones sport, we're used to walking back and forth across that divide. So we took a play called Inexpressible Island, which is, we did this last week. It's a 3-hour play. Inexpressible Island, it's a small island right on the edge of the Antarctic. 6 British men got caught there in 1913, and they had to dig themselves into an ice cave. It's a true story. They dug themselves into a snow cave, and they thought no one would find them at the end of a winter, and they would have to survive, 5 months of complete darkness. They didn't have the food. They didn't have the clothing. Now, these men survived this isolated time in this cave. And David Young has written this wonderful play called Inexpressible Island, which is the name of the island, based upon these 6 sailors, 3 officers and 3 men, who went, how do you survive being at the end of the world when no one thinks you're alive? There's not the means to keep yourself alive. How do you survive mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically? And it's an incredible play, and we've done it on stage many times, but we did it online. And it worked very well on Zoom in that the 6 of us all sat in our darkened rooms, lit ourselves with a single flashlight, and could, as we spoke our dialogue, could move in and out of light. And it had in the theater, it became a blood sport. But here we utilized or found the peculiar power that rests in the lens. And when Barry holds it, sorry, Barry, keep going back to your phone. It's not really the guts and the technological stuff inside the phone. It's that lens. And that lens connects a world to the video card. But on my end and your end, it connects this lens to the most complex video card ever made, which is this thing inside our heads that has as many synapses as there are stars in the universe. Right. So it's those 2 worlds coming together, and it actually works in the zeros and ones and the Zoom. So it was quite effective. It was a hybrid radio play. It was a Zoom play. It wasn't a film play, but the reality altered, as it were. Some people who had seen the stage play went, oh, I don't know, I want to see the stage play. And other people said, no, it absolutely made the transition.
Yeah.
Whether you want to spend your life swimming down the river of zeros and ones, I'm not too sure, because I'm a blood sport kind of guy. So that's where we're at. You paint with the paint box that's given you.
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful. And we have a comment from our folks, Penny. Hello, Penny. Mr. Thompson comments remind me of Glenn Gould, which was another great representative of the so-called Toronto school and a great friend of Marshall McLuhan, who said that the most interesting people to have around oneself are those in the fields of media and communication. That's why I'm here, and I think I'm glad that you are raising these points, Robert, tonight in a sort of Marshall McLuhan's inspired discussion. Because again, to some extent, making sense of communication and languages and media is a way to better understand the role of art and the role of symbolic expression in society.
If I can say, there was a moment, my father taught at U of T, and he actually knew Marshall McLuhan. I never met him.
Wow.
But he was bringing home, he said, I was a teenager, and he said, you should be reading these books. And he would give me the Gutenberg Galaxy, and I would get to page 4, and my mind would fuse and blow. And then he said, oh, no, it comes from Harold Innis. You have to understand the theory of communication. It was way above my head. And then, because I did struggle through the Gutenberg Galaxy, and I thought I was actually seeing what he was saying. But it wasn't until at university I did a degree in science, and one of my majors was math. And it wasn't until I was working on math and on these calculus equations that, I'm a very mechanical guy. There's math, here's the equation, and here's a two-dimensional equation. Fine, here's a three-dimensional equation. Okay, yeah, up, down, sideways. Here's a four-dimensional equation. Okay, so you've got up, down, backwards, and time. Okay, here's a five-dimensional equation, and the rational mind kind of stumbles, and you go, okay, let's pretend there's 5 dimensions. Here's a 9-dimensional equation. And when dealing with a 9-dimensional equation, you either freeze, your literal mechanical imagination, if you have one, freezes, or you slip sideways. And the sideways thinking that I had to do to begin to think I understood the Gutenberg Galaxy was the parallel of sideways thinking of saying, yes, I can think of a 9-dimensional space, and I can think of a 42-dimensional space, and I can think of an infinite dimensional space. In that kind of loosening the mind and imagination so that together they can spin and see things in entirely different worlds outside the rigid frame that has been given us, which teaches us as we grow up. So the artistic side of what McLuhan was saying became utterly relevant to me in the art of it. When it's not, what did my character eat? What does he think? What does he like? All that kind of mechanical, motivational shit, pardon me the word, but allowing to flow sideways and say, well, there's not one story being told in the scene. There's 3 stories being told. There's 4th stories being told. And how do we tell all those 4 stories at once, so to speak? I don't mean layering. That's what the Marvel comics do. They just make the plots more and more complicated. I mean, opening up the gates so that the audience starts to understand they're not riding one whale, they're riding 4 whales at the same time. Yeah. And that, what McLuhan helped me open up my imagination that way.
Right. The simultaneity, right, of these different layers. So, which is a specific a feature of our electronic digital world. Wow. That's absolutely inspiring. So thank you. We have just a couple of comments, a few comments I wanted to bring. Elena Lambert is asking, did you record that performance? Is it online? Is it available somewhere?
Yeah, it's on the Tarragon Theatre website. They have a YouTube theater channel. So you go to the Tarragon Theatre, Tarragon, the Toronto Theatre. You go to the Tarragon in Toronto, and you can see it there.
great, the great Terragon Theater. And hello to friends from the Terragon if you're watching it. And hello to Jason Sherman, the author, the writer for the play. So hello, Jason. Lateral thinking, another comment. So the idea of, McLuhan was a kind of lateral thinker in his days, absolutely. And so, well, thank you, Robert. I will continue the merry-go-round for the McLuhan's probes. It's 9:24, so thank you, Robert. I have another question for you, but later. Okay, I was curious to know from Rhea, here you are, your probe, which actually is connected to the idea of the artist. If I find it, your quote, one comment, and then Folksatom. Feel free to comment and to complement Rhea's thinking with your thoughts. So, Rhea, why we can't shut out sound automatically? We simply are not equipped with earlets.
Yeah, I think the key word for me was automatically. I believe that we actively create our own acoustic environment. As a musician, I am hyper aware of sound versus noise. And in continuing on with what Robert said, the electronic environment has that simultaneity. There's the amplified message in the news that we've discussed, and it can create a panic. And I've noticed that volume is still there. But ironically, the external real environment is quiet because we're all inside. At the moment, the globe is quieter than it's ever been. And so to that, I would add a third component, which is the internal dialogue. And that I really think is like the interrupter to the other two, because it guides the other two components. It's up to us whether we intrude on our global environment, whether we drive a car or a race car, or whether we have a bike or you're on a horse. How much noise are you contributing to the global environment? And then there's also the idea of the electronic environment. How much are we participating in that? We don't have to watch the news 24/7. We also don't have to participate in the social media discussions. We can step away and we can turn it off. So in the work that I was doing, I worked a bit with Schaefer. Armory Schaefer developed coined the term Soundscape, and he did a lot of work in acoustic ecology and from a musical point of view. And so did John Cage. And I found that as you turn up the volume, so to speak, on a planetary level, I think we're accelerating. And then we have that simultaneity. So it's a noise and a speed at the same time. So there is a timeless component. And so there's a sonic and a temporal component, really, when you perform. Cage did it as well in 4 minutes, 33 seconds. So the pianist just has to sit there and look at the score for 4:33. So you have that time component, but it's also you're hyper aware of your sound environment, even though you're not playing.
Oh, and I like that multi-dimensional, multi-layered dimension that Robert was talking about, the idea of a simultaneity, which is actually in that quote. Thank you, Alex, for bringing the exact source, which is Medium is the Massage. And here we are, where a visual space is an organized continuum of uniformed connected thinking kind. An early world is a world of simultaneous relationships. And so thank you, Alex, for bringing it. And there is, in fact, one comment, which is another keyword, I think, for tonight's discussion, a hyper-aesthetic. So the idea of puzzling and fostering our network of senses in different ways, in simultaneous ways. So great anonymous user. So again, be reminded, streamyard.com/Facebook to authorize to bring your name. So hyper-aesthetic. And also Bernadette, lots of Eastern philosophies have discussed the ability to create a sense of internal pose, contrary to a type of distraction culture which breeds reactionaries, right?
Yeah.
Great. Great, Rhea. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your quotes, which is inspiring many comments. I like you, folks. You're doing well tonight. So thank you. Clinton, librarian, was going through all the McLuhan's books when I requested on Be Transfer Deed, and when she saw The Medium as a Massage, she said, oh, this one must be a parody. Kind of, no, a self-parody. Let's say a self-parody. And rightly, Andrew said that acoustic space is anywhere you can ride a wave in, which is a probe, a pun. I know Andrew is a great, how can you say, punist? Is that a such word? Punner. So able to make a lot of puns. Thank you, Andrew, for your comments, and thank you, Rhea. Thank you. Robert Bob Logan, 2 long comments. I'll put it out. So please be short if you want to be on the screen. And Sal say punster. That's great. I like it. Punster. So Andrew McLuhan, you are officially elected tonight as a punster. Okay, but you are my friends. Feel free. Or Mike Pundit. I like that one as well. Okay, and again, playing with words, with languages, with language help to better think. So thank you, Rhea. Thank you. Let's move on. Let's move on to Ramona. Here you are. What's your quote? Let me find your quote, which is what's this one? Yes, is it yours, Ramona?
Sort of joking, saying, I only half believe everything that I say.
Yeah. Our age
but
of anxiety is in great part the result of trying to do today's jobs with yesterday's tools. Well, it's very appropriate. So I'm thinking about online teaching. We are doing online teaching with all the yesterday's tools. So it's hilarious. Anyway, so your call, your short comment on this quote, and folks at home, please compliment Ramona's thoughts.
In terms of online teaching, and how we're preparing courses, and what do we do, and not just courses, but socialization, and how we hang out, and how people meet, and how people have intimate space. And I was sort of touching on this a little bit before. When we think about conferences, it's one thing to just translate a conference onto Zoom, and you can hear that wonderful keynote speech, and that's pretty incredible. And I think even before this, I was starting to think, is it really worth the travel or worth the sort of carbon footprint to be traveling overseas for 4 days for a conference, as we always tend to do? And there is nothing like those people that you meet, and that's what you miss out on when it is a Zoom screen. How do you have those chance encounters, those hallway encounters? And that's a lot of what we need to be building. Also, we know that there's some people who like to sit in the front and ask a lot of questions and who are real extroverts. There's other people who are wallflowers and like to sit at the back and sort of listen in and maybe follow up with people afterwards. And we really need to be thinking about, we've got these tools at our disposal, but it's really about the design. And I think it's not sort of a one-to-one of bringing forward, sort of copy pasting those experiences, but how do we redesign digital space for the needs for our needs right now, so that we're not just delivering information, but actually creating environments that people can be in, where they can forge human connections, where they can be open or be quiet or be shy, or all the things that we know. We know there's so many different kinds of learners, and we need to be responding to the different kinds of learners that are out there. Certainly as educators, we're not doing our job if we're just giving the lecture, giving the lesson. And so to think about the digital world as space, I'm redesigning a course for the fall on virtual identities and communities. And I keep thinking of when I was in grad school at NYU, and we had a wonderful professor who had worked at the Museum of Natural History. And 10 weeks out of 12, we were visiting museums. And it was such a wonderful experience to actually just go, because you can't really dissect something until you've experienced it yourself. And I think even starting to think about the internet in that same way, how do we do field trips? How do we explore this space? How do we embody this space? And so I think that's where we're at now. And, we'll come out of this, but I think we're starting to see the kind of thinness of some of the digital platforms, and we've leaned on them out of necessity when we've needed to connect. But in terms of shared space and everything we get out of and need out of shared space in terms of learning and being together, and that sort of interpersonal human dynamic, I think there's a lot that still needs to be done.
Yeah. And it's interesting. What's going on? It's me. And sorry, what's going on? All right. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. And it's interesting that how you're going to plan your creative design classes online this coming fall. So with this new attitude and mindset in online teaching. So how can you engage your, let's say, creative students and collaborators in this new setup? So any idea?
I think in some ways, we've been having so many of these discussions internally, and it's a lot of work to suggest this, but I think in some ways, instead of saying, let's take one course at a time and see how we translate that course, this, X 101, Y 101, how do we translate that? I almost think in some ways we need to look at the entire first year of a specific program and say, what are the learning objectives and how do we rebuild this from scratch? That it's not about 3 hours online, but it is about, is this part better delivered as an audio recording or a podcast that people can come back to in their own time, as a web content that they can come back to, video content that they can come back to in their own time? When do we need conversation? When and how do we build that sort of embodied space that I was talking about before? As what's the appeal of Animal Crossing? It is just that we can be together in a space. So how do we rebuild that? How do we build space where we are just together, where there is the opportunity to glance over and see what someone is working on, what even if they're not paying attention? All of that is valuable. That sense of being with other people and that sense of presence is so important. So, I think in a lot of ways are so different, but they have to work together. And I think it's looking at the digital world as the internet as a world that is rich and layered and textured and deep, and something that we can move through instead of just being on the flat screen that we have a course in. To think that you're just going to do it in the box that's in front of you, I think is a huge limitation. So thinking about the depth and exploring that depth, and thinking about makers and creators as being in that space and manipulating that space is all very important. I think that's a lot of it. But I think it's a lot of like building it from scratch, which is, it's going to be a busy summer for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think that we instructors, educators, we can learn a lot from artists and creative people in rethinking the way we undertake our teaching, our pedagogy, and how we reach the learning outcomes with our students. So I think particularly we have a few friends in the McLuhan's community which are actually same in the media ecology community. So the idea of a media ecology. And when you see here, Bob Logan was bringing a famous John Culkin, Marshall McLuhan's quote, "We shape our tools, and afterward, our tools shape us." So the new tools, the new media environment will bring probably new possibilities, new means for fostering creative learning how to learning how to rethink the way we teach, right? So that's why I think I'm very keen to learn from artists how to deal with this brand new scenario. I think we should take this into account. All right, Ramona, thank you for your thoughts. And by the way, I have a few comments for you, Ramona. The updated third space of the web, Daniel, so I will say it. And Andrew McLuhan, CDS Classroom, which is a great milestone in Marshall McLuhan's scholarship books, urged us to reimagine the classroom. That's what we needed today again. Zoom as a classroom, the screen as a classroom. I would say the screen as a classroom.
Is that sort of how essential media literacy is right now, because to think that we're just using these tools to be able to have lessons, we need to be unpacking what these tools are, these digital tools by which we connect, and that those are things that we can make and break and evolve and twist and shape, but that's all of the learning as well, that it is not just the vehicle by which we are getting our knowledge, but it is so essential when this is where it's happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. Very impressive. Oh, thank you, Ramona. Let me go to Barry. Where's your quote here? As usual, I seem a little bit distracted, but because I'm in a multitasking mode. Okay, so I'm looking at the comments and visuals, so it's a mess. However, your comment here, your Barry's Marshall McLuhan's quote. Okay, we said already a few words about this, right? So the idea of the vanishing point. So I'll give you another quote for an impromptu comment. Here it is. I don't necessarily agree with everything I say. Someone else actually brought it. Or maybe I can give you, the future is not what it used to be. What's your comment on this?
Well, I have a comment on that, and I can just, if I point back right here, if you look behind me, these are actually maps of light pollution over here. That's
yeah, I see.
Yes. And so those are vanishing points in a way that when we think about electric light, I know Marshall McLuhan said it was a medium without a message, and I can see where that's coming from, but I think it's also had another message, that it's sort of erased the night sky from our consciousness and pushed nature far and far away. So we're all living in these little orbs. And it's in those little orbs where we do our daily vanishing point. So I would say that this is one vanishing point. The electric light, by blocking out the universe, creates sort of a bubble for a citywide kind of removal of the consciousness. But there's another vanishing point, and this is where I think it connects with the future is not what it used to be. For eons, humans thought that we were the center of the universe. That's what it looks like if you're out in the desert and the Milky Way goes over and the moon and then the sun, etc. But there's another vanishing point, and it's deep out in deep space, specifically the Hubble deep field images, which peer into a small point in the night sky and only to reveal thousands of galaxies in what looks like an otherwise empty space. And so what Julie and I did in our essay is we connected up all the layers of media technology. And so it's not just this, it's the Large Hadron Collider underground. It's all the fiber optics underground. It's the layers of media that are underground, the electrical wires, then on the surface, the telephone wires, the cables, the satellite dishes, cell phone towers, and we have our ego media. Then we have drones and satellites that look down. Some satellites look away. Eco media, ECO. And then there are things like telescopes that look away and look out, exomedia. And Robert talked about the lens. Each one of those lenses is casting a different gaze in a different direction. With this, it's all about us, mostly all about us. Not totally, but it's mostly about us. When you look away into the various vanishing points out in the universe, it's a very different story. You can't, in fact, I'm going to be very disappointed this summer if I don't get to go out west, because I always go to a couple of large observatories and look through some really large telescopes, and it's awe-inspiring. And to see what the Milky Way looks like in a dark sky, and then to also look through very powerful telescopes. I'm not talking about a tripod. I'm talking about extremely powerful telescopes at some of the observatories. And to realize that we have a lot of layers in media. And so I'm not a one-trick pony, Robert. This is not the only thing I write about. I write about a lot of other stuff. But when we look away, it's like we're seeing where we really are in the universe. NASA's universe is 2 trillion galaxies stretching across 100 billion light years. So to sort of do a play on what Ramona was saying about we can't do today's jobs with yesterday's technology, we can't do today's philosophy, we can't do today's universe with yesterday's philosophy. We can't do today's understanding of where we are on this planet as a species battling a deadly virus without understanding the deep interconnections that we have as an evolving species. And those connections have been made very clear by the extension of the nervous system out that we have. And I totally agree with McLuhan on that. We've extended our nervous system out, but we've extended it very far out. The Hubble telescope is floating at about 400 miles above the Earth's surface. And we have others. Voyager has left the solar system, and we're going to launch the James Webb. So we have extended our consciousness, as Daniel was pointing out, not just around the planet, but off the planet. And we've actually enclosed the solar system with an electronic media environment. Voyager went out one end, and the other Voyager went out another end, and Pioneer is going over there. And so we've got the entire solar system within the orbit of electronic consciousness. Yeah, and that's an incredible achievement of our species. It's something that's just awe-inspiring. Yet most of us stay trapped here, and we don't get outside to look at that. So we're in yesterday's philosophy, the tribal culture that is engendered by the global village. What McLuhan was saying is spot on. But I think at some point we have to pull back. And so we have the hot take on the phone here, the hot take, right. the hot lights. But when you look out into the cosmos, you can't help but just chill out.
Yeah, I see.
That great distance is a very reflective moment versus the reaction that's required here. And so I think that we need media theory that takes all the layers of media and connects them up into one broader theory, which is what Julie and I did in our essay.
Right. Maybe then I will share your essay in the comments.
Okay.
In the meantime, you see how talking about the reactions, you see how our punsters or pandit or punisher, pungent, punchbox, and so on. So they started making variations and puns on your ego media, ecomedia, exomedia, endomedia. Let me grab from in the comment. All right, Andrew, ecomedia to invoke Narcissus, of course.
Of course, absolutely.
Alfonso, Elon Media, I think. And no, that's not a pun, actually. That's much a serious comment. All right. And so feel free to share your thoughts and your puns, friends at Tom's, folks, to share your thoughts on these variations and puns on the idea of ecomedia, because we are getting closer. So we have time for a final merry-go-round with our special guest speakers for tonight. Let me put you all here. All right, let's make a. All right, I like it this way. So final merry-go-round for you, my friends and guests. Final merry-go-round for sharing your final remarks, for sharing and maybe saying a few words again on the lessons we are learning from the current scenario. So what are we learning, and maybe to get ready for the post-pandemic world. So, Rhea, would you like to start our final merry-go-round? What are the lessons we are learning from this situation, and your final remarks?
Sure. I think during this global timeout, I think we have more than ever discovered who will be in our village moving forward. We've learned who needs us and who we need and what we need, not necessarily what we want, but what we really need physically, psychologically, emotionally, and financially. On a personal note, as an artist, I'm going to continue to explore how we can collaboratively break down these walls that have been erected in our village and redefine our roles as artists and as individuals as we move forward. And I think it takes great courage, not in the ironic sense that Huxley used, but true courage to go forward where the other explorers have been and hold steadfast.
Yeah, absolutely. You bet. You bet. So, Barry, what's your final remark for tonight?
Well, I'm sitting in downtown Philadelphia wishing I was out in the remote deserts of Arizona or Utah right now, because that's where I would be when the summer started. And but you know, I'm looking at the pandemic world, and obviously there's very disturbing trends in the United States. Not just very disturbing trends, but the very disturbing events with these sort of anti-science culture and different things that we see that do not bode well for the future of the United States. But I don't want to end on a negative note. I want to end on a positive note. I think in a way what's happening is we're seeing the acceleration of science and technology sort of moving forward. It's like 2001: A Space Odyssey. We're moving forward sort of on autopilot with all these technologies developing, and yet the tribal part is reversing and pulling back. In fact, in the essay that Julie and I wrote, we talked about the extension of telescopes out, triggering reversals. And I think the more the science is advanced, at least in the United States, you can see these reversals. And so I think in a way, one way I think about it is sort of a metaphor that we're moonwalking into the future. It looks like we're going forward, but we're also going backwards. Sort of, you know, the Michael Jackson moonwalk, you know, which is I actually used to be able to do a really good moonwalk back in the 80s, back in the day. I don't know if I can do it now, but anyway, I think we're moonwalking. There are elements where it looks like we're going forward, but there are other parts that are dragging us back. So we have two trajectories, one going forward, one going backwards.
Right. And no, thank you for reminding that. And also Julia, hello Julia. I just put the the Barry's and Julia's essay on Medium and media scene. Check it out. It's very inspiring. And by the way, so we are sharing some of the thoughts that we are going to share in a few weeks virtually on Zoom for the Media Ecology Annual Convention. So if you have a chance, there will be an opportunity for attending or presenting at the annual convention of the Media Ecology Association online as a virtual convention this year. And the annual theme is communication challenges and opportunities. So I think it's very relevant for better understand what's going on tonight. So thank you, Barry, for sharing your thoughts. Let's move on. Ramona, where are you here? Ramona, what's your final remarks? What are the lessons we are learning?
On our digital tools in a way that we sort of hadn't been stress tested before this. I think we're also seeing where there's shortcomings that we wouldn't have known maybe until this moment, until we were stress testing and pushing against the edges and really assessing what we need when we're missing contact with the earth, contact with community, or sort of physical interactions with people. How do we rebuild that? And, you know, some of those blind spots we may have had before. I also think we're seeing all the barriers with regards to access that we might not think about. You know, you hear stories of people parked outside of McDonald's or parked outside of libraries because they need to get Wi-Fi to continue with work or continue with schooling. So there's a lot of those issues that need to be addressed. And then I'd also say, to the point or to the theme of this evening in terms of the arts and culture, with everyone in their homes, we're seeing how reliant people are on arts and culture. That, you know, what is keeping people in their homes?
Yeah.
You know, we're seeing more opera being streamed and more television being watched, and this idea that we are all creators and people are trying to make things with their own hands. And you know, so hopefully that is a testament to the value of this ecosystem and come out the other end.
Yeah, terrific, terrific. I like the idea of the testament, the lesson we are learning to really conceive the creative industries, to really conceive the culture and creativity as strategic factors to support, to foster our sustainable development, right? So we really need culture and creativity to build a sustainable world. So thank you for reminding that. Much appreciated. And Robert, finally, your final remarks. What are the lessons we are learning? How can we face and get better into this post-pandemic world?
I'm not sure that it has to do about the media. See, I agree with what Ramona said. We have been on a tsunami of zeros and ones for some time. We've all been inhabiting the fiber optic rivers underneath, as Barry says, the fiber optic cables around the world. So where that will take us and our senses, we're not sure. It is an experiment on us, how it changes the balance of our senses, as McLuhan would say, how the media will affect the balance of the senses that we have in our flesh and blood lives. But I think where the pandemic is taking us is that it's exposing in a more ruthless way inequalities that we have grown used to seeing and not paying attention to anymore. That we've seen the inequality in deaths and the inequality, the retirement homes, I now call them the death houses. And we see the inequalities of those people who are paid very little and put on the PPE and go to defend us, where those who are paid a lot and have a lot of power are staying in very safe positions and continuing to accumulate power. And the COVID crisis has actually shone a light into these accumulating inequalities, which have been stressing all of us. So on the one side, there is the media, the Zooms, the fiber optics, and how that will change us, I don't know. But on the other side, hopefully we will understand and take action on the deeper inequalities that we have built into our system around the world. And the downside or the challenge to that is, here comes climate change. And those inequalities, unless addressed, will make solving the climate change issues and stresses even more impossible. So that's what's been revealed for me. As simple as a nurse or a PSW saying, why am I paid minimum wage? And why is my life at risk?
Yeah, that's very impressive. And thank you for pointing this out. And thank you also for bringing our attention to face these inequalities, right? The idea that if we are learning something, we need to learn how to get better in terms of facing this. Absolutely. That's absolutely great. And let me see. I think there are a few, of course, comments from our audience. And I wanted to remind you all, in a few weeks, on July the 20th, we will conclude this series of Monday night webinar with a special Global Village Day, July the 20th. It's going to be the last Monday night webinar. It's Monday, July the 20th. Actually, July the 21st is Marshall McLuhan's birthday. So we will organize a Monday night marathon. So you all are invited. Barry, where are you? Okay,
I'm here. Here we go. Hey,
you all are invited. You are invited on the July the 20th. There will be a Global Village Day and a Monday night marathon. So starting at noon Toronto time till midnight. So for 12 hours, there will be an intellectual marathon to celebrate the legacy of Marshall McLuhan and to face the current pandemic age. So you all are invited to celebrate to this July the 20th Global Village Day. I wanted to thank you all again, Barry, Thank you very much. Ramona, thank you. Thank you, Rhea. And thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. I wanted to thank all friends at home from Italy, Elena, from Brazil, from all across the world to celebrate our I like to call it the togetherness. We talked about tonight about how arts and creativity can really help us retrieve the sense of togetherness. We need to get together to really spark our ideas. And there are many ways to get together, not only in person, even through the online collaboration. So thank you for all people that really are helping us tonight to create the sense of togetherness. So all folks from the Marshall McLuhan's Facebook group, the folks from YouTube and the McLuhan Institute YouTube channel. So thank you very much at home for being part of the Monday night webinar. Well, it's 10 p.m. in Toronto. I think it's time to go. Thank you again, everyone. Because we are in a state of isolation, but we can still touch with each other. So you just put your hand on the webcam and touch and say hi. Hello. It was great. Thank you. And see you next Monday night.
Hey, guys. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Ciao.
Stay safe.
Stay safe and stay sage. Ciao.
Okay, bye-bye.